This trip down memory lane is brought to you by our awesome patrons over at patreon.com/addressing Gettysburg. Did you know that you've been able to enjoy all of our free content mainly because of our patrons? Well, it's true. Why not pay it forward to other Gettys nerds, new and old, by joining our Patreon page? You know you've been feeling guilty for enjoying the fruits of our labor for free for so long, and there's no better way to assuage that guilt than by joining over 530 brave souls who already have. So go to patreon.com/addressing Gettysburg, and we thank you in advance. Now, on to the show.
You're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
And hello, everybody. Welcome to Addressing Gettysburg's Ask A Gettysburg guide. Today, we are sitting here with Jim Pangburn. Hello, Jim.
Hey, Matt. Thanks for having me. It's great to be back.
It's always great to have you on here. People like when you're on. And Bob is also still gone. He's still on vacation to Arizona. So lucky Bob. He's out there in the sun. All right. So let's get right into this here. We've got 6 or so questions that we're going to ask. SJB_5114 is yet another listener who's making his debut on Ask A Gettysburg Guide, and he's got a controversial question. Were some of General Longstreet's decisions, such as possibly delaying attacks till late afternoon on day 2 and 3, part of the reason for the defeat? You hear this a lot. People want to blame Longstreet for Lee's defeat. Everybody but Lee. We can't blame Lee. It's everybody else's fault. But one of the things that we're all, we're always hearing about is, Longstreet dragged his heels and he delayed and but what are your thoughts on that?
Well, Matt, I've always thought that Longstreet was a better general in the defensive than he was as an offensive general.
Okay.
He got kind of mixed up on some of those roads east of Richmond during the Peninsula campaign. Second Manassas, he's in a defensive position where they're attacking him and things worked out pretty well. I don't know that we can say too much about the third day and blame him too much, but I think the big criticism is the second day. Mm-hmm. And what people need to realize, attack didn't come off till 4:30 in the afternoon. It gave Union reinforcements that hadn't already arrived time to get on the battlefield, lengthen the Union lines for Sickles to get here and advance out to the Peach Orchard. Longstreet was trying to move from his camps about 3 miles west of Gettysburg, not too far from where we are right now, along Marsh Creek, to a jump-off point opposite the Union left, not far from the Round Tops. And he came over a ridge and could see the Round Tops over Seminary Ridge in the trees, and he realized if he could see those heights, the Union Army would have Signal Corps personnel up there, and they would be able to see him. And the whole idea of arriving suddenly on the Union left and be able to launch an attack before they could react was kind of lost. So Longstreet decided to engage in a countermarch, which lasted, I think, almost a 7-mile countermarch. He's not ready to launch his attack or seize his position at the Peach Orchard until about 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Now, when you're saying countermarch, you're talking he was marching one way, and then when he realized he's visible, he has to march back on the path that he just marched on.
Yeah, right out here over her ridge. Mm-hmm. I forget the name of the ridge out there. It's near Black Horse Tavern.
Black Horse Tavern, yeah. Is that Bream's Hill?
Yeah, it's Bream's Hill. That's right.
Okay.
That's it. Thank you. And
that's right over there.
Yeah. Now, what's interesting about this is that his artillery commander, Porter Alexander, found a way to kind of go behind a ridge and some low ground, come along Marsh Creek, and then pop out further down toward where the Eisenhower Farm is today, and then come out below the trees on Seminary Ridge and not be seen from Signal Corps guys on the Round Tops.
Right.
And Longstreet didn't listen to him. He did what you said, Matt. He turned around and he just reversed course. But it took until 3 o'clock in the afternoon, about something like 7 hours, to come out of what is today Pumping Station Road, opposite the Peach Orchard, about 600 yards west of it.
Which is near where the Eisenhower Farm is today.
Very close. Mm-hmm. And the whole idea was to seize the Peach Orchard, the high ground there, put artillery there, and attack the Union left from the end. Well, in the time that it took him to get there, Sickles had arrived with his Union 3rd Corps, 10,000 guys, and they were supposed to extend the Union line down Cemetery Ridge to Little Round Top. And, of course, Sickles disobeyed orders and moved all the way out to the Peach Orchard, which was a position that Longstreet was going to seize and put his artillery and launch his attack from. So it caused Longstreet to extend his line another mile to the south because they were told to find the end of the Union line, get beyond it, and attack the Union line from the end. And with Sickles in front of them, that many had to go further. Already the Confederate line is longer than the Union line. The Union line, 3 miles long, the fishhook we talk about, is 3 miles long. And the Confederate surrounding line is almost twice that length. So now Longstreet has got to extend his line another mile because Sickles left now, instead of being on Cemetery Ridge or Little Round Top, is now at Devil's Den, just west of Big Round Top.
Right.
So Longstreet, not only did he have to extend his line, further weakening the Confederate punching power by extending his line a mile to the south, but it delayed the Confederate attack until 4:30 in the afternoon of the second day. Remember, back then, it got darker about an hour and 11 minutes before it does now.
Okay.
So if you come
now it's like around 9 o'clock when it gets dark.
If you come in 2020, July 2nd,
right,
9 o'clock, maybe a little bit later. Year 1863, it's 7:30. It's getting dark.
Ugh.
So my point is, when you launch your attack at 4:30, you've only got 3 hours of daylight.
Right. Okay.
To prosecute your attack.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, I think what Longstreet was trying to do when he made the countermarch is come in closer behind Seminary Ridge and use the trees of Seminary Ridge as concealment. He was further out when he went over Breams Hill and could be seen from the round tops better. So he came in closer and used the tree line as cover, but the problem is it took so long to get in position.
Right.
The biggest criticism I have is, he's trying to avoid detection, but, Alexander insisted that he could get around with his artillery and did
right,
without being detected.
Right.
So that's the biggest real criticism.
Is that he didn't listen to Alexander.
Yeah. There was a way apparently to get around there without being seen and without engaging this unbelievably long countermarch that he engaged in.
Yeah. So the Alexander path that he took was, where did that go?
Well, Longstreet would have been heading kind of in a southeasterly direction, and just to his right along the ridge is where Alexander went
so he's kind of going off southwest-ish?
Kind of west, and then got to Marsh Creek, and then turned and ran along the bank of the creek south, and then turned around and came back east to what is Black Horse Tavern Road today, I believe, but then further down underneath the trees of Seminary Ridge where he couldn't be seen.
Okay.
If you know where, what's his name? The author who's...
Shara.
No. Oh. German name. His son is involved now in creating films. Works for the college.
German name?
Yeah. I can't think of his name right now. Very famous. There's a bunch of books. His house is down along the creek where...
Oh, okay. Borat.
Gabbard Borat.
Yeah.
Thank you, Matt.
Yeah.
That's why you're here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Gabbard Borat.
Yeah.
I'm sorry I couldn't think of the name.
That's okay.
Goodness. Drew blank.
Right.
Gabbard Borat. Yeah.
Yeah.
His house, at least it was a few years ago. If you come off Fairfield Road at Marsh Creek, and you're headed toward Gettysburg, right at the Black Horse Tavern Road, there's a right-hand turn. I think it's Black Horse Tavern Road, if I'm not mistaken.
Jim, just pull that into you a little bit more there. Yeah.
Almost immediately, you go up over a ridge, and there's a housing development there. And that's the ridge where Longstreet crested the ridge.
Okay.
And you can see the round tops from there. What Porter Alexander did is he went to the right there, where the houses are, but kind of behind him. There's a
So he used the ridge that hill is on, or the end of, basically, as his cover. So he went a little further out to conceal his movements.
Yeah, because there's a ridge. There's a housing development on the ridge where Longstreet turned around.
Right.
And Alexander just went to the bottom of the ridge, used it as concealment, kind of followed that low ground to the creek, and then went south along the creek, and then was able to come east again back onto the road they were originally on.
Okay.
But now, when he comes out back on the road, the Black Horse Tavern Road, they're well below the trees of Seminary Ridge, cannot be seen from the round tops.
Got it. Okay. All right, so let's move on here to Quinn2477. He asks, for Ask a Guide, of the many medals of honor awarded at Gettysburg, which one or two stand out most to you? Also, as a follow-up, was there any equivalent the Confederate Congress or Army would have awarded to its soldiers?
Yeah, I'm real glad you gave me these questions last night, Matt, so I had a chance to think about them. At first, I couldn't think of any medals of honor that really stuck struck me, but except for Chamberlain, the obvious what he does. But actually there was, but I don't have specifics on it. I just know that at least one guy, I think there were like 73 Medals of Honor awarded, I think, to Union soldiers at Gettysburg. And some of them over time, not right away.
Right. The most recent, wasn't that given by Obama?
Yeah.
Cushing?
Alonzo Cushing, that's exactly right. That was November 2014.
Yeah.
That's how recent that was.
Yeah.
That's not even 6 years ago.
No.
That's exactly, and that was the guy who had to wait longer than any American to receive a Medal of Honor.
Yeah.
So that's a good point. I like that one. But there was a story that somebody came off the field. Union guys, I don't know who it was. I don't know what union it was. I can't think of it. But he came off the field with a Confederate flag that had been discarded and got the Medal of Honor for it. So just for coming off the field with a flag.
Yeah.
Right. I've told that story before on tours. And so,
now wait, is he the one that didn't actually, he just picked it up?
Yeah.
Like he didn't actually.
You could get the Medal of Honor for coming off the field with a flag. That's why that's one of my favorite Medal of Honor
Sure.
stories.
Yeah. Not to take away from him, I'm sure he was brave in other ways, but for that particular deed of getting the flag, it's not like he wrested it from the hands of some Confederate who was determined to hold on to it. It was just on the ground.
But knowing how protective they were of the flag, that guy had to be in some danger to come off the field.
I'm imagining.
He's in the front lines. He's close to danger. So.
Or enough of the guys who that flag belonged to were wiped out or scared enough that they just skedaddled and left it, So
possibly,
yeah. Any other ones?
Not that come straight to my mind. Okay. As soon as we get done here and walk out the door,
you'll remember them.
Absolutely.
Of course.
So,
Untold_Civil War _ wants to know, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, if you get a chance, listen to that podcast because it's he does a very good job with it and the stories are very interesting and it's an entertaining show. It says, I know the 79th New York Highlanders and I know of John MacArthur's Highland Brigade out west. Were there any Highlanders / Scottish inspired units at Gettysburg?
There may have been, but I don't know of any that come to my mind. But when I saw that question, it really hit home for me because the colonel of that unit was Colonel James Cameron, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, the director.
He had two brothers, William Cameron and I believe Simon Cameron, who was the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania's secretary of the Commonwealth during the Civil War. And Simon Cameron and William Cameron had their hometown, same place I'm from, Lewisburg, Pennsylvania.
Oh, cool.
James Cameron was from Milton, Pennsylvania, which is Northumberland County, about 4 miles away from Lewisburg. And his house is still along the Susquehanna River. And the Milton Historical Society owns it.
Oh, cool.
And there's a statue of the Colonel of the 79th Highlanders in the middle of Sunbury, Pennsylvania, along the Susquehanna River, about 10 miles south of Lewisburg. It's called Cameron Park, and there's a statue of James Cameron there. And the interesting thing about Cameron is he was in charge of the 79th New York Highlanders at 1st Manassas. Excuse me. And he was mortally wounded. And they have a marker up by the Henry House, which is a famous landmark up on
Henry Hill. Henry House Hill, yeah.
Near the Visitor Center at 1st Manassas, where he was killed. And where I used to live in Lewisburg, almost right across the street, in the next block, a lady I know named Betty Cook owns the William Cameron House. The fire department up there is named after his brother, William Cameron. They brought his body to his brother's house, and Betty showed me the fireplace where they laid his body out when they had the funeral at his house.
Oh, cool.
And he's buried in Lewisburg today. So I can't answer the question about Highlanders and Scottish being here in Gettysburg. Maybe there were, maybe some of my colleagues know. I don't. But I do have that connection to James Cameron that he mentioned. And like I said, there's a statue of him in Sunbury, Pennsylvania, right downtown, right on the main street.
So, I mean, there were other units that were, what's the word I'm looking for? Ethnic, yeah. But, I mean, like, of course, famously, you have the Irish Brigade. And that's a whole brigade of Irish guys. Were there any, was it the 24th Georgia Cobb's Legion? Were they here on the Confederate side?
Cobb's Legion was here, I believe.
Yeah, and they're Irish, aren't they? Weren't they the guys up against them at the wall on Marie's Heights?
That may well be.
I believe so. Anyway, but that's just off the top of my head, and I'm not a guide, so you don't care what I have to say, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so let's move on to the next question. JDSW20 says, could you please explain Doubleday's removal from command of the 1st Corps on the evening of July 1st? I've often read that this was Doubleday's finest hour, only to be pulled from command that same night. Thanks.
Exactly. It's a very good question. Doubleday was the senior division commander of the 1st Corps under Reynolds. And Reynolds, as you know, gets killed almost immediately as he's putting the 1st Infantry into the fight at the what we call the Herbst Woods and McPherson Woods. And Doubleday, due to his seniority, rises to command of the 1st Corps, which in the morning were the only Union troops that were here fighting west of town. At about noon, Howard arrives with the 11th Corps and fights north of town. About 4 o'clock, 4:30, the Union right north of town at Barlow's Knoll is overlapped by Confederates coming down the Harrisburg Road, Jubal Early's division. At almost exactly the same time, but independently, Doubleday's left, 1st Corps is overlapped by Confederates coming down the Fairfield Road, where we are right now. And the word that came back to Howard was that Doubleday's men had given way. Well, yeah, they had. It's the one day on the battle that they're outnumbered. Ultimately about 28,000, about 20,000 men. And the word comes back to Howard, who has assumed command due to seniority. When he arrives, before Hancock got here, Doubleday's men gave way. And so, this is the word that goes out, Doubleday give way. It was just like Howard, he never...
Who gave way first, though? Because I know that's kind of a thing, isn't it?
I really think it's pretty simultaneous, man. Yeah. I really do. I've always thought it was.
That's always the impression I got, too.
One thing's for sure. Once the 11th Corps gave way, and I can't blame them at all. I mean, when you look at the fields north of town.
Hell no.
Flat, devoid of trees, different from what's out here west of town. But once they started to fall back, then the Confederates started to get in behind the 1st Corps lines along Seminary Ridge on day one. So the position of the 1st Corps west of town was untenable anyhow.
Right.
But their line was being overlapped.
And that wasn't meant to be where 3 days of, well, they didn't know it was going to be 3 days, but their intention was not to hold out west of town and north of town forever. Right. It was to delay.
Yeah, it was the whole fallback position is Cemetery Hill.
Right.
And you're just, like you said, you're fighting a delaying action so that Union reinforcements can come up and occupy Cemetery Hill and Cemetery Ridge in strength. Mm-hmm. So you're just holding them off until that can occur. And the Union Army did a great job on that one.
But now with the Doubleday thing, though, so Reynolds is put in command of the left wing, okay, right?
Right.
All right.
That's right, left wing.
Before the battle.
Here. Right,
yeah.
Which means he's also in charge of Sickles' 3rd Corps and Howard's 11th Corps.
Right.
But he gets killed, so Howard takes over.
So, okay. Now, because I know this confuses a lot of people. So, when he takes command of the left wing, he's got 3 Corps to worry about now. So now Doubleday is in command.
Yeah,
so really, before he gets killed, Doubleday is the commander of the 1st Corps?
That's right, man.
Okay.
That is technically correct.
So then the battle occurs, and Reynolds is killed before Howard gets to the field, correct? Or around about the same time?
Before he gets here. He got killed probably around, he got here around 10:30, maybe 10:15 to 10:45, and Howard arrives around noon.
Okay. So then Doubleday, who's already in command of the Corps, and the 1st Corps is the only Corps engaged, sees himself as in command of the field.
Yes.
And then Howard arrives, new to the field.
Right.
Though he should be the guy who takes over command of the battle now. Mm-hmm. Doubleday, doesn't agree? Isn't this kind of a point where there's a little bit of a contention?
I think Doubleday knew that Howard, by seniority, would take command upon his arrival. But Howard has the north of town, and Doubleday has the west of town.
Okay.
And I think when Hancock arrived, Hancock had been authorized by Meade down in Tawnytown earlier that day. They had discussed the plan. And Meade sends Hancock up here and says, now you're not going to have seniority to take command, but I am giving you authority to take command because you know what I have in mind here. You know what I want, and you're going to see the lay of the land, and I think you should have that responsibility.
Who says this to who?
Meade says this to Hancock.
To Hancock, correct. Right, okay.
Who leaves Meade, who stays down in Tawnytown to bring the rest of the Union Army up. He comes forward ahead of his Second Corps.
Right. And
Hancock arrives on Cemetery Hill at the lowest moment for the Union Army in the Battle of Gettysburg. It's late afternoon of the first day, and all the bad Ds are in effect. Mm-hmm. Defeat, demoralization, disorganization. And the Union troops are the ones who evade capture in the town. And 4,000 of them don't. They get captured. Are coming out of the south end of town, and they're coming up onto Cemetery Hill. And, you know, they could have just kept on going over Cemetery Hill right back toward Maryland, where their pre-prepared position has been established by Meade along Pipe Creek. Mm-hmm. And Hancock arrives. And in that low moment, that moment of chaos, he says, no. You know, it's a great place to fight. You guys over here on this side of the road behind the wall, and you guys over here, he's telling them to stop and rally. And it's the turning point in the battle. At that point, the Union Army has retreated to higher ground than anything on the first day's field, which is Oak Hill, and the Confederates control that.
Right.
That night, the Union Army gets more heavily reinforced than the Confederates. They form a 3-mile line, which will be half the length of the surrounding Confederate line. And now the Union line is the interior lines. The greatest distance between 2 points in the Union line, Culp's Hill, the round top, 2 miles. 2 miles. The outer Confederate line that surrounds the Union line goes through towns about twice that length.
Right.
6 miles long.
Yeah.
The word gets back, I think, to probably Hancock and probably eventually to Meade. Doubleday gave way. Well, you know, Howard isn't going to come and say, my men gave way north of town.
Of course, right.
Doubleday's men gave way. So the impression is that Doubleday's men didn't fight particularly well. This is going back to people who weren't even here when it was occurring. So yeah, I think Doubleday gets a raw deal. And when the 6th Corps arrives, General Newton, Division Commander, 6th Corps, last Union troops to arrive, second day, he is then ordered to take command of the 1st Corps. And that's a slight to Doubleday. Sure. But it isn't right. But it's just one of those things where a report comes back that's not accurate and gives it's kind of misinformation, and it's that Doubleday somehow failed. And I don't think he did at all. I don't think most people here would. I think most people here at Gettysburg would agree that Doubleday's men, just like the 11th Corps north of town, did everything they could as long as they could.
They couldn't take it. Yeah.
Didn't matter who was in command out there. No. The line was going to get overlapped in the retreat.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was inevitable that it was going to happen. It's obvious. I mean, of course, this is all with hindsight, but it's obvious that they were overwhelmed. All right, so let's see. Moving on to the next one here. The hiking historian is back, and she's got 3 questions. We're going to try to get through these pretty quick, okay? Actually, yeah. Okay, so here we go. The hiking historian wants to know, my ancestor was in the 93rd PA, but was released due to tuberculosis. He managed to survive and then re-enlist as a substitute in the 149th Bucktails. Was substituting a common practice? How did it work? Any reasons why soldiers would have switched units?
Yeah, a lot of interesting questions there.
Yeah.
Substitution was something that wasn't unusual at all. And it was a deal where you could actually pay somebody, you get drafted, but you could actually pay somebody to fill your spot. And I think the amount usually was like $300, which, who knows what that's worth today, but a lot more than that. So her ancestor apparently got injured, wounded.
He had TB. He was discharged due to TB, and then he survived and re-enlisted as a substitute. So I guess somebody got drafted, and then he went as their substitute into the 149th.
And got paid. But evidently he went originally into the 93rd
PA.
Legitimate enlistment.
Which was 6th Corps, right? 93rd PA?
I believe so. I believe so.
Yay.
And I'm pretty sure you're right about that. And he does the honorable thing. I mean, he did his part. He comes back and he enlists in a unit that has a very high reputation. That's the Bucktails. That's the Stone's Brigade that fought out of here on day one. So it was not an unusual situation at all to hire substitutes. Maybe he needed the money. I don't know. The number of the unit is the order in which they were formed in that branch of service for the Civil War.
Right.
So the 93rd was formed before the 149th. It's possible, I don't know, because I think the 93rd was here, that their term of enlistment, because some of them, only enlisted for like 3 months or 9 months at a time.
Right.
The term of enlistment, by the time he came back from TB, could have expired.
Well, sure.
And he wants to do his part. So maybe he finds that the 149th is still out there and is trying to replace losses. I don't know when he came back, but losses from, right here at Gettysburg or maybe Chancellorsville. and re-enlist to his credit.
Right.
I don't hear that happening very often.
So basically, like what you're saying is the 93rd could no longer be in existence, possibly.
Possibly.
Right.
Their term of enlistment may have ended.
By the time he comes back into the fold, and
Which explained why he would enlist in a different unit.
Right.
But they're both from Pennsylvania.
Right.
So maybe the 149th is now starting to form up, or maybe they're looking for people to replace the losses they took in places like Gettysburg here, where they took a lot of losses.
Sure.
And they probably needed experienced men. I don't know. He might have even come back at a higher rank given his experience.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm just speculating.
All right. Well, then let's see. She's got another question here. What was basic training like for Civil War soldiers?
Nothing like I think it is today in the military, where you're doing all the running, and the Marines doing what they call the crucible at the end of training, 48 hours of constant activity.
Yeah.
A big thing right before Gettysburg was hygiene when Hooker took over. And they really made an effort to start to dig trenches. They built wooden platforms to put tents on, improve the food and everything, because they were really losing a lot of guys to disease. I think the main things that they were looking at are how to use your rifle, 9-step procedure to fire your rifle, making sure the soldier individually knows how to operate his weapon. And then the other thing is integrating him into the unit. So, learning how to move with the unit, like how to wheel right, wheel left, refuse left, move from
just
column formation.
Drill, basically. Yeah.
And if you read the accounts of soldiers, they write letters home. A lot of times they say today's activity was wake up, clean up, drill, take lunch, drill, have dinner, drill some more, and then reveille. So I think most of it was a lot of drill, just teaching guys how to. Because
now, and Eric, why don't you open your mic here? Because you were actually in the service and you're a reenactor.
Yeah, you're a good person to answer that.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm guessing, I haven't been in the service, nor do I reenact, but I'm guessing back in those days it was more teaching you how to be part of a cohesive unit. Today, it's like everybody's an army of one, as they say. Is that right? Like, each man is a warrior instead of a soldier.
So kind of the whole thought process behind it is completely different today than it was then. At the time of the war, you're talking about, you've got two main places where you're going to get new people. It's either going to be a new regiment that's got to be trained entirely from the ground up.
Okay.
Or you have, like you guys were just talking about, substitutes coming in, but they're not getting like any kind of basic training. They get brought to the front by some kind of escort unit from the regiment that they're going to. Then they get thrown into a company and off you go.
Okay.
And they pick up training as the unit's doing it, not like...
They're training on the go. Like,
there's not like a training camp set up at Camp Curtin or any of those where you've got like a depot that's taking individuals and training them to a basic standard and then they get put out. It's... you're a substitute or you got drafted, you're going to report to this camp at whatever date, and then the unit that you're going to has sent an escort to take you to them wherever they are.
Okay.
And so, like, I just got done reading the regimental history of the 111th PA, and you go through the roster in the back of the book, and you can see they get this massive amount of substitutes. It's either late 63 or early 64, right before the Atlanta campaign. And all of these guys have deserted within about a space of 2 months.
Huh.
So they go from getting somewhere around 250 to 300 replacements as substitutes, and like 75% of these guys are gone before they even start out on the Atlanta campaign.
Wow.
So it's kind of two completely different schools of thought.
So, but today though, when you go in and you go through basic and everything like that, what are you doing? You're doing, you're learning a lot of things because there's a lot more technology available to you, right? The weaponry is more complicated.
Yeah. So most of it is, how to be a soldier,
right.
They teach you some close order drill stuff that you need to know when you get out into the line units. But a lot of it is based around, this is how your weapon functions. This is how you shoot it. These are some basic by the book maneuvers that'll kind of maybe keep you alive. But the whole premise is, and they even tell you that, or they did when I went through basic anyways, they tell you, like, once you get out to your line unit, they're going to teach you a completely different way of doing this to their standard. This is just what the Army's standard is.
Right.
And this is what we have to have you to before we can put you out.
It's like when you watch movies about Vietnam and they get the replacements in, and then the vets who've been on the line for 6 months or whatever, they say, all right, you're not going to need this, and they just start throwing stuff away.
Yeah. You basically take everything you learn at basic training and dump it within the first 2 weeks after you get to your unit.
Right. Let's get to the third question with the hiking historian. She wants to know, what is your favorite historic building or home in Gettysburg? Are there any that are often overlooked by visitors?
I saw that question and I thought that is just a wonderful question. I was really impressed with that.
Yeah.
Because very few people have ever asked me that. And it made me start to think. Mm-hmm. And I thought nothing comes to my mind. Something did. One farm, before I get to the one that I think probably is the one that is my favorite, is the P. Snyder farm down by the Arkansas Memorial, down along Emmitsburg Road. And the reason, I guess, I like that farm is because, almost all the historic buildings on the battlefield are occupied by park rangers.
Right.
Who, the idea is that buildings that are occupied are better maintained than buildings that are vacant. And that building is one of the few that's vacant.
That's the little old wooden one, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
And the reason I like to think it's vacant is because what makes it kind of unique, when you drive by it, there's an outhouse right out there.
Oh, yes.
Well, there's a plumbing problem.
Yeah.
Anybody who lives there in January in the middle of the night has to leave the house and go out there. So I thought of that. But there is a house I talk about all the time on tours, and I probably should mention it, and it's the Schultz house.
Oh, yeah.
It was owned by Herman Haupt, H-A-U-P-T, who was in charge of the military railroads during the Civil War, was here at Gettysburg during a battle. And it was Abner Doubleday's headquarters. And it's located at the corner of West Middle Street and Confederate Avenue by the seminary. In other words, where Middle Street goes over the Seminary Ridge, it's on the southeastern corner. And many people have seen it.
Yeah.
It's got a very unique architecture.
Beautiful house.
Beautiful house. And
beautiful price tag when it's on the market.
Oh, yeah. It was on the market last year, and I think they were looking for a little bit less than $1 million.
I think it was like $850 is what I remember.
But now I seem to remember about 10 years ago, someone, I don't know who, I don't know if it's the same owners or not, but they were trying to sell it, and they had it on the market for like $3 million, or am I imagining that?
I heard like 1.6 million.
Okay, 1.6.
And then it didn't sell at that.
Yeah.
And they had to lower it to just under $1 million.
Right.
And what Eric said, I heard like 889, something like that.
Yeah, it was somewhere between 800,000 and 900,000.
That's a little more reasonable to me. I mean, I not that I could afford it, but it's, it's a beautiful house. But let me ask you this, though, because I've always wondered this. It's the Schultz house. It was Doubleday's headquarters. How much of the existing house today is Civil War era? Do you know? I
don't know for sure, but I think most of it is. I think I've seen pictures of it.
Really?
At the time.
Because it looks like it's a hodgepodge of architecture.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't look...
unique.
Yeah, it is. And it's beautiful inside. Have you seen pictures of it inside?
Yes, I have.
Only
once. Apparently, when it was on the market, you could get photos of the inside, which was pretty amazing.
That's what I saw.
I pulled them off Realtor.com, and it was amazing.
Yeah.
But one of the reasons I like it so much is what's inside.
Okay.
Now, I haven't been in there to see it.
Okay.
But there's a guy who used to drive the Gettysburg Tour Center bus for the Gettysburg Tour Center, and he retired a couple of years ago. His name is Jack. And when that house went on sale, what was it, about 10, 12 years ago, Eric?
Yeah.
Jack took the opportunity to go in because the house was open since it was on the market.
House. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So he went in. He saw bloody footprint stains.
Oh, neat.
In a corner of the room. And they're footprint stains of surgeons because the house was a hospital and the surgeons were performing so many amputations on wounded soldiers in the house that the surgeons themselves were soaked with blood. So the smocks they wear, trouser legs, right down to their leather shoes. And I haven't been in there, but I have been in another place. I'll give some free advertising to the Doubleday Inn Bed and Breakfast on Hospital Road.
I've been there too. It's a nice place. Yep.
Well, they had bloody footprint stains near a window.
I did not see those.
Were near windows. A friend of mine was staying there years ago, and he took me over to the corner of the room, and he pointed out to this dark stain. He said, "What does it look like?" And I said, "Well, it looks like the outline of a shoe." And he said, "That's what it is." So then Jack had told me, the driver, about the footprints he'd seen in the Schultz house that I have not seen. And we were talking, and both of them, the one I saw and the one he saw in two different buildings, were near windows, and it made all the sense in the world.
Going to vomit.
Well, no, they didn't have any natural light. So when they would perform amputations, they'd put these tables next to windows. They use natural light. So that's why these. And if you ever watch that Civil War series, Mercy Street, there's a scene where Josh Radnor, who plays the Union doctor, is standing with his back to the window, and he's got a patient on a table, and on the opposite side of the doctor, there's a guy holding a mirror from a chest of drawers at an angle. He's reflecting the sunlight. Did you see that episode?
No. But I get where you're going with that.
You can picture that. Yeah. He's reflecting the sunlight through the window down onto the patient opposite the doctor. And I went, wow.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. So whenever I make that turn off of Middle Street onto West Confederate Avenue, along the Confederate battle line, the 6 mile long on day 2 and 3, I talk about that. This morning I did that with a group from Texas and talk about the bloody footprints.
That's amazing.
On the floor, so.
How about in town? You have any in town besides the Schultz house?
How about the Wills house?
Oh, the Wills house.
You know, simply because Lincoln stayed there.
Sure. And it's a cool house.
Yeah.
I mean, it's big.
I've been in there.
Yeah.
Other than a lot of buildings that I haven't. Well, you know, the Shriver house. Okay, I give them a
Shriver, sure. Absolutely.
You can go up to the attic. It's open to the public. And they actually have bloodstains up there in a window where Confederate sharpshooters hit. A few years ago, detectives from Buffalo, homicide detectives, went up there, asked for permission to take samples to see if they could get DNA off the blood stains, because they figured anything they ever encountered, would certainly be able to analyze if you can analyze something from 1863.
Sure.
Farnsworth House, of course, got the little window up there, you know, where the Confederates were and all the bullet holes all over it.
Now, have you been up there? Can you go up there in the Farnsworth House?
I worked there. For summer, and someone close to me worked there for many years, and so I was able to do a ghost tour or whatever. They took us up there. I've been up there once or twice. And I think I've been there once or twice in the Shriver house. So you actually see evidence from the battle. It's pretty cool.
Sure, yeah, of course that stuff's neat. I always like the what the hell is it called? The House of Bender. On the square. Yeah. I haven't been in there. I have a friend who was doing like renovations in there, and he said that like there's still bullets in the rafters.
Wow.
And he said he showed me some pictures of the place. It's pretty cool because there's, you know, just the layers of history in these buildings, and you could tell, oh, these renovations were made in the 1950s because of this and that and the other thing, but you could still see the original building and, you know, intent of the building when it's empty and you're renovating it and stripping it down and stuff.
Matt, there's something else I thought of, and this was when I saw the question last night that you supplied to me, and you just reminded me of it again. One of my favorite houses is one that doesn't exist anymore, and that's the Forney Farm, which would be right behind the 17th Pennsylvania Cavalry marker up by the Peace Light Memorial.
Yeah.
But the reason I'm bringing that up is when you're in the museum, the Visitor Center, and you know the Visitor Center is arranged like a gallery, and you wind your way through these mazes, and they hit you with things that happened before Gettysburg, battles before Gettysburg, and then the heart of the museum is the 3 galleries for each day of the battle. Well, as you're going through the portal from day 1 to day 2, there's a series of wooden beams from the Forney house.
Yeah.
And they have the path that a cannonball went through the beams. And you can look up and see it. And that was from the Forney Farm. Unfortunately, they took it down in the 50s. But I always think of the Forney Farm when I think of that. And that's pretty cool. So anybody who hasn't been up here or has been up here but hasn't been in the museum and seen that, it's a pretty cool thing to look for.
Sure. Yeah. No, I always remember that. I think when I first came here, that impressed me the most. Like, that's always been stuck in my head, the image of that. That was at the old visitor center, you know. The Forney Farm, was it the 50s or was it before the 75th that they did that?
I thought it was taken down in the 50s. I thought that's what I'd heard recently.
Okay.
Which would mean it should have been there during the 75th. And I know what you're saying that because there was just a huge crowd of people all around that watching FDR dedicate the Peace Light.
Right.
I've seen pictures of Forney Farm, but I've never seen during that 1938.
Right. Because the reason I feel like it was for the 75th was because the superintendent of the park he just wanted to make room for crowds. So he said, he basically said, oh yeah, it's structurally unfit, and we're not even sure if it's a historic building.
Oh, well, now that. But up to that point, because obviously it was.
Yeah.
The story's consistent with what you said.
Yeah.
That they were worried about that, and that the thing was supposedly falling apart anyhow. Today they would get in there and do everything they could to fix it. And the thinking was just different back then.
I can't imagine that, because I remember Tim was telling me one time that the middle school now, over there by Culp's Hill and Cemetery Hill, was basically that property was given to the borough by the Park Service. Like, it was some kind of weird swap or something.
I read about that.
I mean, that boggles my mind.
Yeah,
what the hell were they thinking?
There's a book on the history of the battlefield, and it was just written. Can't think of the author's name right now.
Oh, I gotta read it.
Well, but she's now a college professor down at Virginia Wise in southwestern Virginia. She used to be a seasonal park ranger here. I can't think of her name right now. But she wrote a book on the history of the battlefield. And I remember reading that section, and it said what was going on is I think the park was concerned that the town was going to put a housing development near where Stevens Knoll is today, like Menchie Spring, and that they made that deal, gave up that land near where the middle school is, that swamp, in order to keep the borough from developing that land. That's what I read.
So, okay, so when that happened, then, so the borough owned what, out to Menchie Springs?
Yeah, apparently they did. They owned some land in that area.
Okay.
And we're thinking about developing it, like for houses and stuff.
Oh my God.
The park didn't want that, so they were willing to give up that land where the football stadium is at the middle school today.
Right.
And that's how that got into.
Wow. And that's where the Louisiana Tigers charged up, right?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Supposedly, the story about. I'm just drawing all kinds of blanks today. North Carolina Colonel Francis wrote the note, "Tell my father I died with my face to the enemy."
Bergwin? No. What the?
I'm just drawing a blank. But supposedly he scribbled that near where the concession stand of the football field is today.
Avery?
Yeah. Isaac Avery.
Yeah.
Is it Isaac Avery?
Yeah, it's Isaac Avery.
Yeah, okay. So thank you.
Well, if it isn't, it is now.
Avery, that's who it was.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. Avery. He wrote it at the concession stand. Is that what you just said?
Yeah, that's what I read. That's where he was wounded. Where the concession stand today stands is supposedly where he scribbled that note.
It's just really amazing to look at how previous generations... to see what they valued and how they looked at a piece of ground and treated it. And like today, the thought of all of these things is like reprehensible to us.
Yeah.
Built on the battlefield. And it almost, like, even when things are restored, for me, it's nice, but it also loses a little bit of it because it isn't untouched. It isn't pure. It's not untouched since 1863. It's restored to what we think it was in 1863. And so any treasures that are left in that ground are gone from whenever they, had to build the hotel that was there or whatever it may be. But at least it's not, at least it's back to National Park, or not back to National Park. Go ahead.
Well, I remember the name of that author.
Okay.
There used to be a seasonal ranger here. It was Jen Murray.
Okay.
And she's the one that wrote the history of the battlefield that I got that from. And you were just talking about something that touched on something else that she wrote that really hit home with me when I read the history. And it's that, when the War Department ran the battlefield, from when it first became a national military park in 1895, the War Department ran the battlefield, and they maintained it the way it looked at the time of the battle because they were using the battlefield to train officers, and they figured, like the Park Service today, to their credit, the more it looks the way it did at the time of the battle, the easier it is to understand what's going on.
Yeah.
But when the Park Service took over in 1933, they were coming from a background of natural beauty. And Jen actually writes that they were actually planting trees, the Park Service, to conceal monuments, to enhance natural beauty, because that's where the Park Service is coming from, as opposed to interpretation of the battlefield. Now, thankfully, in recent years, that's all changed.
Yes.
And now the park is more moving toward seeing things the way it was then. But there was a time when they first came in, this is the way they were thinking, and they were kind of de-emphasizing. Well, that's, I think, probably when the redbud was planted by a park superintendent, which is great today.
Where are you talking?
The redbud. The purplish flower that comes out in April, late April.
Oh, yeah.
That gorgeous flower.
Yeah.
That was planted, I think, in the 1950s by a park
so those aren't
superintendent.
native to the battlefield?
That was planted, I think, intentionally by a park superintendent throughout the park. And today, it makes the park, I think, the most beautiful time of year.
Sure.
When you see that.
Yeah. No, it's amazing. Like, there's so many layers of history on just this 6,000 acres here that, it's not just the battle. There's so much more to that. Eric, you look like you were about to say something. Well, no, I've called attention to you now. Don't wave me off.
I thought part of that tree planting initiative was soil conservation during the 30s. That was my understanding of it.
Oh, yeah, it might have been, yeah.
Good one, Eric.
I do what I can.
You call out the expert. Thanks. No, I'm just teasing you. It's okay. No, Eric, don't cry. Eric, Eric.
Well, today the park maintains the battlefield by leasing it to local farmers.
Yes.
The thinking being that the best way to preserve the battlefield is to use the way it was used then. It was farmland.
Yeah.
So they leased, I don't know how many people know this, but they leased the battlefield to farmers who raise a crop on it, sell it.
Yeah.
Part of the profit they make in the sale of crops goes back to the park, but the best thing of all, the ground is preserved the way it was then. So.
Yeah, and it adds to the aesthetic as you're driving around there and you're seeing corn, even though it might not have been corn at the time of the battle. You got to rotate your crops.
They
and
rotate.
such.
Good agricultural practice to rotate the crops. So you're right. Now, our peach orchard is always going to be peach trees.
Right.
And our wheat field is always going to be wheat field.
Yeah.
But I have noticed that you can be out here driving on the first day's field, and one year what was corn, the next year looks like wheat or something like that.
Right. Right.
But that's okay.
One of our favorite people in the world, the great Trinetti, he wants to get deep into the psyche of our guide today. And he asks, what is your opinion of George McClellan? I know he is very controversial, and I see why.
I think George McClellan is like anybody. They get a reputation one way or the other. This guy was good, this guy was an idiot, this guy was bad, and that's just the way we think about him. When everybody has pluses and minuses. We can criticize Sickles all you want, but Sickles is the guy who pushes legislation through in 1895 to turn Gettysburg National Military Park. So he's a better congressman than he is a general.
Sure.
And I see McClellan the same way. McClellan was a great organizer. That was his strength. Mm-hmm. He was brought to the Army right before the Peninsula Campaign. The Union Army was in disarray. What does he do? He brings them together, he organizes them, he puts together a great machine. And they advance up the peninsula. The problem is, in 1862, the problem is he doesn't like to see the thing he's created, his creation, destroyed.
Yeah.
And so he's hesitant to commit the army in battle. Antietam, he attacks in stages, whereas if he'd attacked all at once, he could have overwhelmed the outnumbered Confederates.
Yeah.
And that's the thing in the movie Gettysburg that General Lee addresses. There's a scene where he says, when you go into battle, you must be willing to destroy the thing that you love, the army, meaning you've got to commit your troops. And, McClellan would fight a battle, and then he'd turn around and he'd retreat and lick his wounds before the next battle. And all that did was give the Confederates a chance to recoup their losses and prolong the war. And then, they fired McClellan after the Peninsula Campaign, and then they brought him back again for the Antietam Campaign. But he was very slow to pursue the Confederates after they retreated after the Antietam Campaign, and it really bothered Lincoln. And Lincoln said when he found Grant and brought Grant east and made him commander of all armies, he said, and people talked about Grant and his drinking, and is it a good idea to make him general-in-chief? And Lincoln said something like, well, I can't afford to lose him. He fights.
Yeah.
And Lincoln also said he understands the arithmetic, which meant that the Union would win a war of attrition. Mm-hmm. So Grant would commit the army. The Overland Campaign in late April, early May of 1864, right after Gettysburg, he hits the Confederates in the wilderness, and he is rebuffed. But what does he do? He immediately doesn't stop and lick his wounds. He immediately goes around the Confederates and hits them against Spotsylvania. Right. And he did it at North End, and he did it at Cold Harbor. And what's happening? He's forcing the Confederates to retreat, and they're losing troops they can't afford to lose. Confederates go into a 10-month siege at Petersburg. That leads to Appomattox. He understands the arithmetic. Well, McClellan apparently did not understand the arithmetic, and he would delay and reform the army, and it would take all kinds of time. McClellan was his own worst enemy. They called him the Little Napoleon, but there's a story of him. You guys have probably heard about this, where Lincoln came to his house to talk to him one night. This is the President of the United States, Commander-in-Chief.
Yeah.
You remember this, man?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
And the servant said, well, I'm sorry, Mr. President, but the general is out tonight. So Lincoln says, well, I'll wait. So Lincoln's in a parlor waiting for McClellan. McClellan comes back in. He doesn't see Lincoln. The servant says, well, President's here to see you. And McClellan says, well, I'll talk to him tomorrow. Goes up the steps and goes to bed. And completely blows the President of the United States off. And now, I think that hurt him later in the war.
Was McClellan, and just of the Army of the Potomac, was he the youngest commander of the Army of the Potomac?
It seems like he probably was.
Because he was, I think, 38, wasn't he?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Now, to me, when I heard that, it kind of blew my mind, because that's, in my estimate, I mean, I know these guys were all pretty young, but to be commanding the Army and you're not even 40, it's
Meade was, 47?
Right.
Here, Gettysburg.
Yes. So to me,
McClellan's
38 years old.
Yeah.
And he just sounds like when I read his writings and stuff, like to his wife and stuff, it just sounds like a pompous, petulant, arrogant little child. Well, I don't like him at all, because I think I mean, what do I know? But I feel like if he was a little more assertive with the Army, maybe more would have died in the short term, but I think he might have not. The war might not have lasted as long.
That's it exactly.
I don't know.
No, that's it exactly.
Yeah?
Yeah, that's what Grant understood. Yeah, if you commit to Army, you're going to get a lot of casualties, but you're going to end the war earlier, which in the long run should be fewer casualties.
Right, but Grant came in later when the armies had matured. Because, especially when you read about the Army of the Potomac, it seems like they're kind of making it up as they go along. Like, they're learning on the job. They're figuring it all out. And so when Grant comes along, they seem like they've gotten their act together prior to him coming, and then he just now he knows how to use it, and he knows how to pull everything together a little better than what they've been able to see, because he's kind of coming from the outside in,
right?
And now he uses it as an effective weapon against the Confederacy. But I mean, so maybe if McClellan did have a pair early on, it would have still lasted 4 years. Maybe I'm wrong, but it just, when you read about it and it's sad. It's like a sad waste of life and time and everything. But whatever. Go ahead. You were trying to say something.
No, you were right. You made some great points there. Grant learned from his experiences in the West. Vicksburg campaign. How many times did he try to capture Vicksburg? I think 7 times.
Yeah.
He understands the value of persistence. Yeah, you can have setbacks, but just keep pounding. I forgot what I was going to say.
Well, but yeah, Grant brings McClellan didn't have that experience, I guess, is where you were going. He didn't have, because he's earlier on in the war. And
yeah, there was a battle somewhere like in Missouri or something, I think of the first year, and Grant was a lower level commander. And they said something about they were marching down the road toward the Confederates and how nervous they were and how apprehensive they were. And when they got to where they thought the Confederates were, they were gone. And then Grant said, that's when I learned they're probably as afraid of us as we are of them.
Right, yes.
And then that leads to his successes at places like Donaldsville and Fort Henry in Tennessee.
Yeah.
Big success right after that. But McClellan was a great organizer, and when the Army needed him to do that, he was there. Right. So he served his purpose. The one time he was aggressive was the Antietam campaign.
Right.
But that's only because he found Lee's orders and found that Lee's army was divided into 5 pieces. Yeah. And then he's boldly marching towards South Mountain. That's the one time you see him being aggressive.
I love Grant, though. I love his whole attitude. I think Grant is a guy, no matter what your walk of life is, and you're faced with any kind of adversity or something, read about Grant.
Yeah.
And his attitude. I love I think it's at Shiloh when it was after the first day and Sherman comes up to him. He says, took a licking today, and he says, yeah, whip him in the morning.
Yep.
Like, just okay, yeah. So, but tomorrow we're going to beat him.
Oh, he said something about Lee one time.
I know what it is. You think he's going to do somersaults?
Double somerset and land in our rear.
Our rear.
So why don't you go back to your tent and think about what we're going to do to him?
Right. Right.
And I remember that's the same period. That's the beginning of the Overland Campaign when he first joins the Army of Potomac. Now, what people don't realize is he was promoted to General-in-Chief, which meant all his predecessors, like during Gettysburg, it was Henry Halleck. These guys are not in the field.
They're in the offices.
They're in the War Department.
Yeah.
And they are receiving telegrams and they're sending orders out. So they're in between Lincoln and the commanders in the field. He's the overall. Grant chose to travel with the Army of the Potomac after Gettysburg to act as a buffer between Washington and that's why Reynolds turned the command down. He didn't want that political interference. And he's heard a lot about Meade. That Meade was slow to follow the Confederates after Gettysburg, which is nonsense. And that, he wasn't that great a commander, which just is not true. But so he'd been fed all this bad information. And he meets Meade somewhere near the Wilderness in May of 1964. And Meade walks up to Grant and offers to resign to make it easy for Grant. And it threw Grant completely off balance. He didn't expect that at all. He said, no, I want you to remain. And that says something about Grant. It says something about Meade.
Sure. Yeah. No, and I like Meade too. I know you love Meade, and don't criticize Meade in front of Jim because he will go nuts.
Well, you can criticize him if you want to. He was just what the Union Army needed at this time. The thing that I get mad about is when people say he didn't pursue the Confederates.
Me too.
In a timely manner. That's what I get mad about. Meade has his faults too.
Yeah, sure.
But that's what I get mad about because we know that he did. And it's just not fair to Meade.
No.
That's why I get upset.
But it's not fair to... because I get in this with my father all the time. When he comes down here, we drive around, he goes, I still can't believe it didn't chase him, And I'm like, Dad... You're doing movie history. Like, there's so much more to it. It's not just like the Confederates were licked and the Yankees were sitting there buffing their nails. Like, they were just as tired and beaten and, well, why couldn't they send the cavalry? Well, they did.
They did.
Yeah. But what the hell's that do? We were just talking on the last episode with Tim. He's not a big fan of cavalry, and so he kept pointing out all these things. He goes, Kilpatrick took Monterey Pass, and he goes, and then the Confederates showed up and he left. Like, what's the point of taking it? So, all right, one more thing here. The great Trinetti asks, this kid's great. He's always thinking, he really loves his Civil War history, and so I want to answer all the questions he sends in. What batteries on both sides were involved in the fight on Benner's Hill, and what their role was? I don't know what he means by that. What were the batteries that you could recall? I mean, maybe not. Let's do battalions. Can we do battalions and brigades?
I could have done that. When I got this question last night, it was at the bottom of the list, and it was getting pretty late, and I was getting pretty tired. And I went, oh no, this is the one that I'm not going to be able to talk about off the top of my head.
Right.
So I had to go do some research on it. As far as the role goes, as far as the Confederate artillery goes, it was two things. One, it was to help support Longstreet's attack on the other end of the Union line. So that artillery, that Confederate artillery is on the far Confederate left.
Right. Longstreet's
going to attack on the right, opposite the Union left, down where all the famous landmarks are. Big Round Top, Little Round Top, Devil's Den, Peach Orchard.
We're talking day two.
Day two. So the plan was to make it look like a demonstration on the Union right at Cemetery Hill and Culp's Hill by the Confederate left up on Benner's Hill. By doing that, you force the Union Army to keep troops on their right, keep them away from the left where the main assault by Longstreet's going to begin on the Confederate right. That's one thing. And then the other thing was to support the Confederate demonstration that did turn into an attack on the Union right on the night of the 2nd by Johnson's division. I was able to get some names of batteries and so forth. The battalion that was on Benner's Hill from the Confederate side is Latimer's battalion. Okay, maybe we should define the term.
Sure, okay. Let's do that.
A single cannon is a gun.
Right.
2 cannons is a section. Mm-hmm. Usually a gun is commanded by a sergeant, a section is commanded by a lieutenant, and a battery is about 4 to 6 cannons. And that's commanded usually by a lieutenant or captain.
Now wait, so Confederate Army it's usually 4, Union Army it's usually 6. Is
usually, that's
typically how it
there
works?
There are exceptions to that, but that's generally how it works.
Okay.
So if you take 4 batteries of 4 guns each, you form a battalion of 16, and it's usually commanded by like a major.
Okay.
And the interesting thing about this question and Benner's Hill and the Confederate artillery is that Major Latimer charged the battalion, 16 guns. 19 years old.
Yeah.
He's the Confederate version of
McClellan.
Baird Wilkinson.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Who, performed the amputation on his own leg when he was hit. Yep. 19 years old, also battalion commander, which is pretty impressive.
But that would have been a brigade, right, in the Union Army?
Yeah, see, that's the confusing thing, because you have battalions which also applied to infantry in some cases in the Civil War, but are also referring to artillery on both sides here at Gettysburg.
Now, I remember one time when I was first learning about all this stuff, I just looked in the dictionary for the term battalion, and the generic, like, non-military term battalion is that it's really just an organization of men. Like, it doesn't give a specific number. It doesn't say made up of companies. It doesn't say half of a regiment or anything like that. It's a battle group.
It's bigger than a company.
Of course. It's
not as big as a regiment.
Right. Yeah. Right. So I think because like words like legion is another one.
That's
you have a couple of units that call themselves a legion. Like Hampton's Legion, right? It was Hampton's
Phillips Legion. Cobb's Legion.
Yeah, Cobb's. Yeah. But are they technically a legion? Because I think a legion meant a certain number of men.
Sometimes a legion
or something like that
could actually involve all three of the major branches: cavalry, artillery, and infantry. And a lot of times they were privately funded. So like Phillips or Cobb or Hampton would actually fund it.
That whole notion of a legion actually goes back to
like Roman times, right?
Well, no, we're talking about the composition of the American legions after this is in the 1790s.
Oh, okay.
So like around the Whiskey Rebellion time period, where a legion was actually what we'd call today combined arms, where you had infantry, cavalry, and artillery within the same organization. And if I remember correctly, Hampton's Legion was actually made up like that when they were recruited. They were formed as infantry, artillery, and cavalry all together.
Oh, okay.
I think that's where that comes from.
That's interesting. Okay, so I just went and Googled it here. The term originally it means 3,000 to 6,000 troops in the ancient Roman army. That's where it comes from.
That's big. That's a lot bigger than what we had here.
Now we kind of use it as to mean a vast host or multitude or number of people or things. But of course, and then every country too. Every country has kind of a different definition of each of these terms, and But anyway, so Civil War though, 1863, artillery. Confederates call them battalions, and those are 4 batteries, right?
Yes.
And then Union calls them a brigade. Is that also 4 batteries, or
pretty much? Pretty much all battalions or brigades and artillery on either side were about 16 guns.
Okay, so go ahead. You had your notes.
Well, on the Union side, the problem with Benner's Hill artillery is it was out in an open plain, and the Union Army was able to bombard it from 2 locations: East Cemetery Hill and Culp's Hill, concentrating their fire in one location, whereas the Confederates had to disperse their fire, and the Confederates got the worst of it. But the artillery that was up on East Cemetery Hill under Howard was commanded by a guy named Osborne, and he had about 10 guns there that he used against Benner's Hill. The Confederate batteries up there, since we were asked, were commanded by Captain Rain, C.I. Rain, the Lee Battery. That's R-A-I-N-E. The Rockbridge Artillery. The Chesapeake Artillery, which was Maryland guys. The Rain Battery was Virginia guys. That was William Brown, Captain William Brown. Captain DeMent had a Maryland battery up there, and J.C. Carpenter had the Allegheny Artillery up there. And I think there was a Kilpatrick Battery that was across the north side of the Hanover Road, opposite what we call Benner's Hill today, where there's some still guns up there.
What, a Kilpatrick...
Kirkpatrick. Okay. And it was a battery commander. You can see the battery tablet up there on the north side of Hanover Road up at Benner's Hill.
Oh yeah, well there's another battalion over there, wasn't there? Yeah.
And a lot of people don't go there. They just take the road because there's no pavement.
Right.
So you have to kind of park your car and walk across the Hanover Road.
It's like playing Frogger trying to get across that road.
It is, Matt. It's dangerous.
I know.
But it's worth it because there's something you'll see over there that you only see on one other part. You know what I'm talking about?
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Go ahead and hit
It's the pile of balls.
That's it. The pyramid of cannonballs.
Yep.
You'll see them at the angle, at the copse of trees. And the only other place in the battlefield I know of where I guess they're there because
nobody goes there, yeah.
and you can't see them until you actually go across the road and over the ridge, and then you can see them. Very few people do.
For a while, we thought that maybe the Park Service forgot they were there, but they mow there, so they have to know they're there. They just, I wonder why. It seems like, okay, the Park Service at one point in time said, you know what, let's get rid of these pyramids. Okay, kind of. We'll forget about those. Leave those. Doesn't matter. Like, why do it half-assed? Just
because those are unseen and they're less likely to get vandalized and stolen.
Okay.
So I think the park is happy to keep them, have them in a place where people can see what they used to look like.
Yeah.
But not have them all over the battlefield. It's the same way in the cemetery. Between the state plots coming from the Soldiers National Monument, there used to be like a starburst, like on my ring. It was sidewalks that divided all the state plots. Today there's only one. It divides the New York and Pennsylvania plots. You know why it's there? Well, they took them out because of mowing.
Okay.
Modern mowing equipment going over pavement, not good. So they took them out, but they left that one sidewalk.
So that we could access.
So we could see what it looked like. We could see what all the other ones. They left one. So you can see what all the ones that were there that came out. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
There used to be all of them. They took them out because it was difficult to mow, but they left that one sidewalk. It runs from the Soldiers National Monument down toward the sidewalk, down toward the stone wall, toward the annex.
Right, where the World War II guys are. Yeah. Huh. Okay. I didn't know that there were walkways there. I got to learn more about the cemetery.
Just one.
No. But I'm saying that there at one time there was more than one.
They look like my ring.
Yeah.
They all went out and raised from the center.
Huh. That's pretty cool. Yeah. Okay. So you have more?
The Union batteries on East Cemetery Hill were under Reynolds and Cooper, Pennsylvania units, I think. And Stevens Battery, Stevens Knoll, is named after the 5th Maine Battery Union that were involved in that.
Stevens Battery,
named after Stevens. So those were the Union units that were involved in the artillery duel that the Confederates got the worst of up there.
Yeah. Real quick, just let everybody know what happened to Latimer's battalion, then we'll wrap up.
They had to withdraw a lot of the guns from that open ridge. They had to move a lot of them across to the north side of Hanover Road out of range because they were taking the worst of it from East Cemetery Hill and Culp's Hill. And they left, I think they took the 10-pounder Parrots, the more valuable guns at that time, and they were greater range, so they moved them a little bit further away. No, actually, I could be wrong with that. I think it was the Parrots actually that they left there. And when you go to the end of Benner's Hill to the cul-de-sac where you turn around, you can still see a couple of 10-pounders on display off the side.
Those are the Parrots there.
Yeah, that was Rains Battery, I'm pretty sure. So I think they actually left some of the 10-pounders there and moved some of Napoleon's away because they were not at that range. They weren't real effective.
And some of the horses the teams got so mangled up that they had to use some of the same teams to pull off the different, like pull a gun off, unhitch, and then go and get another gun and bring it back because they were low on horses. And I know I'm not going to do it justice, but there's this really great quote I read from a guy who's describing it all. And I guess, this one team was just mostly, and when I say team, I mean like group of horses, was mostly just down, like dead or wounded. But the wounded horses were flailing around and getting all jumbled up in the reins and the harnesses and everything. And the men who were what do you call them? The teamsters, not teamsters, but the
wagon drivers.
Yeah, the driver, the guys who were with the horses.
Yeah.
Well, they're getting tangled up in that mess too, and other guys had to come over and shoot the horses in the head in order to stop them from bashing in some guy's brains with their hooves. Like, it's, movies don't show any of this stuff because I don't know why, but I mean, I think if any movie ever really like showed this, you would never. I think that's how you would end wars. Yeah. Like, you just show
you might be right.
You just show people how horrible it is, because it's also it's not just people that's getting destroyed. It's animals that have nothing to do with this. They have no dog in the fight, and that's what sucks about it all. All right, anything else to add to that?
Latimer himself, the battalion commander, 19 years old, he was mortally wounded up there, and they took him back to Virginia, and he died, I think, in Harrisonburg about a month later.
Yeah.
He's buried in Woodbine Cemetery, Harrisonburg, Virginia today. I'll just leave it at this. This is kind of a private thing I don't generally share.
Okay.
But because we brought up Benner's Hill, it's one of my favorite places to go, and if you've never done this, you might want to go up there sometime at night.
Oh, yeah.
Because Benner's Hill is east of Gettysburg, and it sits up higher. So when you're along that road that crests that ridge and you stop, you can look down at the lights of Gettysburg. and they appear kind of amber, and it's a totally different perspective of Gettysburg.
Yeah.
You're looking down, it kind of reminds me of probably being like in Mulholland looking down at Los Angeles, but in a smaller scale.
Right.
And it's there's very few people ever go up there, so you probably won't be bothered by too many people. And
Yeah.
it's just a really neat place at night, like when it first starts to get dark, to look down at the town of Gettysburg. I don't know of any other view like it.
No, that is also one of my favorite places to go because A, there's nobody there. B, I love not only the view of the town, but then you can see the peace light beyond the town. And my favorite thing, and this is really best done during the summer, when a storm is coming from the west. You go out there and you watch it approach. You watch it, engulf the mountains, and you watch it just come across. And then sooner or later, you can't see the town because it's raining on the town, and you just wait until it gets to you, and then you get in your car and you sit there or drive away or whatever. But when that storm comes in, especially late in the day, sunset, when that sun is skimming down across at an angle, you get some really pretty colors out there.
Oh, you do?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But I've seen that same view, Matt, doing bike tours on Little Round Top.
Yep.
And you see it coming.
And you get the hell back.
You know you're probably going to end up being wet by the end of the tour.
Oh, yeah. By the time you get to the angle, you're going to be wet, which is probably welcome by that point anyway, because everybody's so hot, right? So it's like...
But no, you touched on something else that's really neat. A lot of people discover this about Gettysburg. When you get some days with a little bit of clouds, it is a great view from looking towards South Mountain to see the sunset. You get some incredible sunsets from there. So I'm sure you get the same thing from Benner's Hill.
You do.
You're looking west from Little Round Top or Benner's Hill. If you get a little bit of cloud cover late in the evening, it's one of the beautiful parts of Gettysburg.
It's definitely better, I think, from Little Round Top. But Benner's Hill is, I find it to be a little more interesting because, Little Round Top you're seeing for miles and miles and miles. Benner's Hill, you're still seeing for miles and miles and miles, but it's not an unobstructed view. So you got the town in the way, and then you have Seminary Ridge. And so beyond Seminary Ridge, the only thing you can see are the mountains. You can't see the ground between Seminary Ridge and the mountains. So it's different. It's a different view. You're not seeing as much. But either way, I mean, honestly, you can't go wrong here. If you're looking for sunsets, ladies and gentlemen, you cannot go wrong coming to Gettysburg and just opening your eyes at sunset time, and you'll see something pretty. All right. Great, Shanetti. Great question there. And thank you, Jim, for coming in.
You're welcome. Great
it was great to have you, and we'll get you out in time just for your bus.
Thank you.
And that's it, Eric. Thanks for chiming in before as well.
Yep, thanks,
and
Eric.
Thank you all for listening. Keep your questions coming in if you want to hear or if you want to take a tour with any of these guides that you hear on the show. Matt@addressinggettysburg.com, and I will put you in touch with them, and you guys can take it from there and hopefully work something out. So until next time, we'll talk to you later. Bye.
Let not your sons be not dismayed, but join with me, show your blade, booze and sing, and lend your aid to help me with the chorus. Instead of sparkle, drink down there and pay the reckoning on the nail. No man forget shall go to jail from Jericho in glory. We'll break the windows, break the doors, the watch knocked down by threes and fours. Then let the doctors work their cures and tinker up our bruises. Instead of sparkle, drink down there and pay the reckoning on the nail. No man forget shall go to jail from Jericho in glory. Our hearts so stout have got us fame, for soon 'tis known from whence we came. Wherever we go, they dread the name of Gary Owen in glory. Instead of sparkle, drink down there and pay the reckoning on the nail. No man forget shall go to jail from Gary Owen in glory. Instead of sparkle, drink down there and pay the reckoning on the nail. No man